So the first round of the NBA playoffs are finally over, and man, do we have a lot to talk about. Now we'll be making individual videos about the Los Angeles Clippers and the Houston Rockets in the upcoming games because, boy oh boy, what you did, Jalen Green, in that series was despicable. Please count your days. You're probably going to be in Phoenix or Milwaukee. That was bad. That was really bad. However, on this video, I'm just going to give a quick overview on all the teams so far in the playoffs, kind of wrap up what I saw in the first round, and predict what to expect throughout the rest of the playoffs. But if you do want to see more of my instant reactions throughout these series, of course, you can always check me out on the Lowlights channel. There, not only am I streaming daily, basically, but I'm also giving some of my reactions and some of my takes throughout the series that I upload on the channel, which are my stream clips. So check me out over there. However, in this video, we're going to be a bit more organized, and we're going to kick things off pretty quickly because there's a lot of things to discuss. First, let's talk about the two teams that, in all honesty, not really much to gather because that's how bad they lost in these series. These two teams obviously being the Miami Heat, and then you have the Memphis Grizzlies. Two teams that got swept, did so in historic fashion, and to be fair to them, they did match up against two teams that can perform at historic heights in both the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Oklahoma City Thunder. To start off positively, and in all honesty, probably the only positive thing I'm going to say about these two teams, A, Davion Mitchell from the Miami Heat played really well, and then B, Scottie Pippen Jr. with the Memphis Grizzlies also played really good basketball. So both of them, I do believe, should be staples moving forward. For the Memphis Grizzlies, this is a huge pickup for them, or at least identifying this is really big because I do believe there's going to be significant changes throughout the roster in the next couple of months, so be on the lookout for that. But outside of that, I mean, not really much to take out of this series at all. I will say this, I thought that Tyler Herro's ceiling was slightly higher than I originally anticipated, but for the Miami Heat, this is a team that clearly was overly dependent on Jimmy Butler over the past handful of seasons, and his value was truly revealed after this series because Miami was nowhere near close to competing with the Cavaliers. Tyler Herro seemed like he had way too much on his plate with his offensive responsibility now as a pseudo point guard. Bam Adebayo seemed like he was completely overwhelmed by the size of Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, and Andrew Wiggins, he's a role player. He's Andrew Wiggins. He's not a Jimmy Butler replacement. So that's all understandable and quite frankly expected. However, on the other side, I have to say I'm a bit more disappointed in what I saw out of Memphis. I'm going to be a little bit more lenient on the Ja Morant criticism in large part because his entire season, in my opinion, has been a complete mismanagement on who he is as a player and a playing style that more than likely he prefers to play. And also he did get hurt in this series, so there's that as well. But when it came to Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr., they were horrible, like really bad. Offensively, they just didn't have it. Triple J was completely disappointing defensively. And when it came to Desmond Bane, I mean, I don't even know where his offense went. Again, I understand that they were matching up against a team that defensively performs at historic heights, but I did not expect them to look that bad, which is very important to highlight and identify because this is a team that has to make a decision on Triple J sooner than later. And because he qualifies for a Supermax contract, who knows if that's actually on the table. It certainly wouldn't be on the table for me after this performance because at the end of the day, regardless of how you feel about how this series shook up for Memphis, they still at some point has to beat the Oklahoma City Thunder to compete in the Western Conference. And if you are this far removed from them, I just don't necessarily know how you can actually combat or compete with anything that's going on in the West moving forward. And no, Ja Morant, I do not believe if you were 100% healthy and finished the series that you quote unquote figured them out. This is a series in which it could have been and probably should have been closer than what it actually was because Shea did not perform that well, but they just beat you by committee and what they did on the defensive side of the floor. The next couple of teams we're going to talk about are the young, rambunctious teams, the defensive leaning rosters that had a lot of upside, but definitely problems in the half-court offense. We're talking about the Orlando Magic, Detroit Pistons, and the Houston Rockets. I have to say, when it comes to Detroit, they were by far the most impressive to me. Cade Cunningham from start to finish, very impressive. Shooting splits weren't there, but the passing and playmaking certainly was. Obviously, this team needed a second ball handler and creator outside of Tim Hardaway. That was a massive yikes. But moving forward, when Jaden Ivey is healthy, he certainly will fulfill that role. So we ain't got to worry too much about Tim moving forward. And as long as they have that, they certainly will be able to compete with a team like the New York Knicks moving forward. Because if I'm not mistaken, in like 3 of the 4 games that the Knicks won, the Pistons had a lead in the fourth quarter. And in 2 of those games, they had a lead all the way deep into like the last minute of the fourth quarter. So these are games that were very winnable. You give them a little bit more reps, a healthy season with Jaden Ivey, and improve Cade Cunningham with a roster that also needs some slight tweaking as well. And I certainly believe that they will be able to compete with some of the higher echelon teams. So I am thoroughly impressed with what I saw from that team, especially defensively. Shout out to Ausar. You actually gave Jalen Brunson the fits in this series. So shout out to you. Moving on to Orlando, and again, very impressed, especially what I saw from their two best player in Paolo and Franz. However, I will say when it comes to Franz, I thought I was going to see a little bit more offensive output from you. That hitch in your shot certainly took away from a lot of that value on that side of the ball. But I do believe that in this series, all those two needed to prove is that they are the future, that Orlando can build around them, and they did just that. Paolo was amazing from start to finish. He finished his series averaging 29 points, 8 rebounds, and 4 assists. Shooting splits were very impressive, 43.5% from the field, 44 from behind the arc, 66 from the free throw line. Can get a little bit better from the charity stripe, but nevertheless, really, really great offense from Paolo in a series where you match up fairly evenly against Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. This series continues to display what Orlando has been struggling with over the past 2 to 3 years, and that is simply put a competent offensive roster around your two best players. That's it. We all thought that KCP was going to be better this season. Unfortunately, he was not. And then Jalen Suggs is out and you're giving us Corey Joe minutes. So that right there was terrible. But shout out to both Paolo and Franz. I think they were actually really, really good in this series. And, you know, it's the Boston Celtics, so you can't really ask for much outside of a very competitive 6 games. And then we have the Houston Rockets, where I'm a bit more torn with this team, but still very optimistic about what this roster is going to look like moving forward. Shout out to Amen Thompson. He struggled a little bit in the series, but certainly looked better in Game 7. And Alfred Sengun did not close out this series that well, but overall, I think he had a solid foundation to build off on after the 7-game series against the Golden State Warriors. And you can't really ask more than what you got out of him. Double-double guy, 20 and 10 against Draymond Green. Again, very, very impressive. Jabari Smith probably should have played a little bit more minutes. And then you got quality rotational minutes from Steven Adams coming off the bench. And then your leader in Fred VanVleet really showed up in the latter half of the series. Certainly wanted to be a bit more consistent in the beginning of the series where, again, it could have been winnable, but nevertheless, it's Fred VanVleet. He's not a part of the bigger picture when it comes to Houston. And also, Ime did a hell of a job coaching. I mean, the defensive schemes you were throwing out there against the Warriors, amazing. But of course, and again, I don't want to get into too much detail about this, Jalen Green, brother, they just needed you to be an all-star caliber player. Give them 15 to 20 points consistently. It didn't even have to be efficient basketball. Just give them 15 to 20 points, and I do believe this series would have swung in a different direction. But Jalen Green struggled to do that, and now you're knocked out in the first round. And finally, we had the last 3 teams that were eliminated in the first round, the Lakers, Clippers, and Bucks, and there seems to be a bit more sense of urgency to answer some of the questions that need to be addressed, and understandably so, especially for the Clippers and Bucks, because it seems as if like they're at a bit of a crossroad. In terms of the Lakers, not so much. I get it. Uncle Shannon Shea said, Lakers in 5. Nick Wright told you that they're going to make it all the way to the finals. However, I told you that this roster was incomplete when they made the trade for Luka, even though I was a bit higher on them to make it out of the first round against the Timberwolves. At the end of the day, it really doesn't surprise me because, again, the roster was incomplete. The team clearly needs a 5-man, needs a bit more defensive pieces surrounding Luka, and in all honesty, this is a year of adjustments rather than a year of chasing a championship after they traded AD and Max Christie. I was a bit disappointed in Austin Reeves what he provided in the first round, and even though, yes, there is already reports coming out that he had a sprained toe, in my opinion, the biggest reason why he struggled against this series is because of the physicality that I've been kind of hinting at over the past couple of weeks leading up into the playoffs. And so come to find out it is true. Dealing with that level of physicality that we saw from the Timberwolves seemed to be too much for Austin, and he struggled pretty mightily. Both LeBron and Luka were up and down throughout the series. I don't believe that's going to be a consistent theme with a fully healthy season in Luka, and then also LeBron in the closeout game dealt with an MCL injury, so we can kind of wipe that out as well. But he did also start the series a little bit slow. Some would claim that it was because of the groin injury. Regardless, though, I just don't believe that this is a team that will be able to compete at a high level until they flesh out the roster completely. However, I do believe that that is fixable in the offseason. However, for the next 2 teams, who knows? Milwaukee is in a state of despair. spiraling out of control, and it's something that many people already knew was going to occur, but of course Damian Lillard tearing his Achilles certainly expedited the process of revelation for many people. And then when it comes to the Clippers, I'm going to make a dedicated video about them, but Kawhi outside of one game was fairly underwhelming for the status in which he holds in the NBA, and James Harden game 7, peas in a pod. I mean, it's a disaster class waiting to happen, and that's exactly what we received. And then quite frankly, even before game 7, Harden was a bit underwhelming after game 2, so there's that as well. All in all, I am a bit disappointed when it comes to the Clippers because at the end of the day, I don't believe this result justifies everything that you had to go through throughout the regular season, effectively sitting Kawhi out for half of the year and taxing James Harden so much so that potentially it added to this type of result in terms of a first round exit and you not being able to beat the worst iteration of the Denver Nuggets in the first round. I mean, that's a big old yikes. Big old yikes. Now, those are all the teams that got knocked out in the first round. What about the teams that are remaining? I'm going to be honest with you. What I probably believe is my biggest takeaway of the playoffs so far is that there is a noticeable gap between Boston, Cleveland, and OKC in contrast to everyone else in the playoffs. It's that big. I mean, sure, some of these teams, you give them a lot of credit for getting out the first round. You give them a pat on the back, but you are basically preparing them to get belt to ass for the rest of the playoffs. And I say this even though Indiana has already beaten Cleveland on their home court. Now, to be fair, that series may be a little bit more even-handed. Indiana matching up against a Cavaliers team where Darius Garland won't be 100% healthy. And if anything, because they lost game 1, they're going to rush him back on the floor because of course they need to at least split the games while they're home. I'm going to be honest with you, I still feel like if they were 100% healthy, the gap will be pretty significant. I give a lot of credit to what Indiana is doing. However, it's really hard to gauge how good they are, mainly because they matched up against a Bucks team that was an incomplete roster, like didn't have all the pieces needed. It was a bunch of Giannis ball, just going out there and crossing your fingers, hoping that Giannis can either score for himself or create for someone else. But outside of that, nothing else really going on for the Bucks. And again, the Pacers looked great tonight. Like really, really good, but I don't necessarily know how sustainable all that is. Also, to the Timberwolves, I actually do believe it is a really well-rounded team that can go more than just 6 to 7 players deep. They have an 8, potentially 9-man rotation that can give you quality minutes, and that's something that will be the difference maker between them and the Golden State Warriors. But I just don't see how any of this is going to translate beating OKC, Boston, or Cleveland throughout a 7-game series, especially when all of those teams are healthy. Golden State, really great win, game 7 against Houston, but this is a team that was struggling mightily to score over 105 points in the first round. Outside of Jimmy and Curry, no other player was giving you consistent offense. And sure, that might be enough to get you past the Houston Rockets, might be even enough to get you past the Minnesota Timberwolves, but I just don't see how you're going to compete against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Shout out to the New York Knicks. They play really well against an inexperienced Pistons team, but they still rely way too much on Jalen Brunson ball. For whatever reason, I was watching Brunson way too many times, and he was looking like Allen Iverson in 2001. Like he had no other offensive weapons around him. It was actually crazy what they were doing out there. Thibodeau, this will be your last year coaching. I promise you that. There's just no way that he comes back running an offense like this. It's actually ridiculous. And again, I'm not trying to be too harsh on the team that ended up winning the series, but OKC and Boston in particular, they seem like they are just so far removed from the pack that it's scary. Jrue Holiday didn't even play in the first round, and they were still definitively better than Orlando. Tatum didn't play all those games in the first round, still looked definitively better. Shea shot poorly in the first round. OKC still looked definitively better. And sure, the competition in the second round will certainly be more difficult. Again, Cleveland is already realizing that with Indiana, but Boston looked as good as they did in that first round. Jrue Holiday was absent. Jason Tatum missed a game. OKC looked that dominant. Shea didn't shoot that well. Certain players on that roster couldn't knock down that 3-ball, and they were still blowing out the Memphis Grizzlies. And so, yes, the Boston Celtics matching up against the Knicks, going to be really great basketball. The Oklahoma City Thunder matching up against the Denver Nuggets, going to be really great basketball. But another thing that we learned in the first round of the playoffs is how valuable depth is going to be moving forward, how valuable lineup versatility is going to be moving forward, not just for the playoffs, but I do believe moving forward. The league is too talented to be overly dependent on 6 or 7 players depending on the night, especially when you're going up against OKC that can go 7-8 players deep, the Cavaliers team that can go 7-8 players deep. Hell, even Indiana, they can go pretty deep as well with their rotation also. But if you are Denver, regardless of how talented Jokic is, you will be going up an uphill battle because you only have 5 to 6, maybe 7, but really just 5 or 6 players that are going to give you quality minutes. And those numbers dwindle down even further when Michael Porter Jr., we learned in the first round, not able to lift up his arm. Then you have Russell Westbrook up and down depending on the game. Jamal Murray, he finally came back alive throughout this series, but even that wasn't consistent at all. So again, having a limited rotation will hurt you immensely going up against rosters that can not only go 7, 8 players deep, but can throw out different lineups. They can go double big, they can go one big, they can play small ball, they can run up and down the floor, they can be more defensive oriented, space out the floor with a 5-man offense. Like, those are all things that you have to be accustomed to. And if you don't have the certain counters in terms of lineups to throw out there, you are effectively showing your hands early on in the series and then telling the rest of the world, I have no one else to play. The Lakers got immediately caught up in this. The Knicks will continue to get caught up in this, and something that we've known about them for, in all honesty, the entire season. And I do believe if you are the Pacers, you're getting a lot of value out of Nembhard right now. Who knows if that's going to continue to happen. If you're looking at the Golden State Warriors, that's something that you've been struggling with as well. B-Pods was the 3rd leading scorer in that series, and he had a game that was scoreless and 2 or 3 other games where he couldn't get over 10 points. I am telling you, that is a massive problem. And one of the biggest takeaways that I learned in the first round, how valuable depth is going to be, not only in the series moving forward, but for the rest of the years to come, especially in this new CBA, where a lot of teams are going to be limited on what exactly they're going to build in terms of their future and build around their stars. Which then kind of leads me to probably the biggest takeaway of them all, and that is, we are definitively in a new era, new generation of basketball. Not only because a lot of the older players have now officially been eliminated. Curry is the last man standing along with Jimmy Butler and Draymond, but those are the last men standing in terms of old school, 35, 32 and up players. Everyone else has gone now. LeBron is gone. KD make it to the playoffs. Both Kawhi and Harden are no longer here. These are all players who are like 30 and under right now, leading the charge throughout the rest of the playoffs. And I do also believe that this is indicative to the new era of basketball that we're seeing in terms of talent, skill set, depth. Like, no longer can you build a team with the identity of you have the 2 best players on your roster, and that's the reason why you're going to win. I think that's the idea that a lot of people, including myself, got caught up in on picking the Lakers over the Timberwolves, despite the fact that the Timberwolves have a 8-man rotation. They can go 8 players deep, give you different lineups, and that's something that is really hard to combat when you have players as talented as a Jaden McDaniels going out there leading the team in scoring, not once but twice. Naz Reid coming off the bench, giving you great production, and then Julius Randle and then Anthony Edwards sprinkling their production, and then bam, out of nowhere, game 5, Rudy Gobert is giving you a 20-20 game. Those are all things that are really hard to overcome, even if you do have the 2 best players on your roster. This is kind of the reason why I think the Knicks are not going to make it that far. It's the reason why I don't believe Golden State is going to make it that far, and it's the reason why I am really, really high on OKC, Boston, and Cleveland. They just have the depth, they have the continuity, they have the impact on both sides of the floor, and it's going to be very interesting to see how teams combat that. Yeah, this is a new era of basketball, young faces, and personally, I love it. I love the NBA is moving in a different direction. I just don't know if everybody else is prepared for what they're going to witness, not only in the second round, but in the conference finals as well. Nevertheless, though, I enjoyed the first round. I thought it was really, really great hoops. A lot of big takeaways from this, especially in terms of team building moving forward, something to really take into consideration and consider before people start making trades for Giannis and Kevin Durant moving forward. But overall, I highly advise people to just enjoy the game itself. Way too many times that I see on my timeline, people claim that if Curry or LeBron wasn't active in the second round, that they weren't going to watch. I promise you, these players, these youngins, they're really great at the sport. I promise you that. Hey, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comment section below. Make sure to subscribe button, notification bell, and until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.